Government will hold the flag and we will not give it to the hands of private. India is definitely an international country. It has its capability, it has its capacity, everything, point taken. We all know that the Constitution of India was adopted on November 26, 1949, but the Economic Constitution of India came with the IPR, the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956. Good morning and welcome to the first session, Chapter 3, Unit 1, first semester B.Ca, pre-reforms of Indian economy, where we are going to speak about the industrial policy. It's a very, very interesting topic to speak about. The reason is that India wanted to become an industrially advanced nation right after the independence. But what was actually stopping us was the government evaluation, the methods of thinking about it. Now let's look into it. Actually, if you talk about the word industrial policy, it's a set of standards and measures that are set by the government to evaluate the progress of manufacturing sector that ultimately enhances the economic growth. So if I have to put it in simple words, it is all about understanding how an industrial methodology, a policy, can take forward the growth of the country. Now, every nation is blessed with its own economic resources, both natural as well as man-made abilities. Now, what happens here is that many a times we miscalculate. We believe that in order to race against other countries, in order to be the world number one in manufacturing, we just hurry up and we put all our resources into the manufacturing sector. We start believing that that's how the enhancement, that's how the growth is going to happen. But what happens in reality, in thought process, is that the thing is entirely different. We suddenly start thinking that this is not what we were looking for. What we are looking for, what we are actually trying to develop is that the government will take a stand. Government has to understand where we exactly go through in terms of revenue, in terms of development, and then we start moving further. So the government takes measures to encourage and improve the competitiveness and capability of various firms. So the government understands that yes, there is a capability in this particular sector. Now let's say energy sector, healthcare sector, or infrastructure. So we look into certain sectors where we see that the companies have the capabilities, both private as well as public sector, and let us enhance our manufacturing capability in that particular area. Moving further, what are the objectives of the industrial policy? One, to maintain a steady growth in productivity, which is of course needed. The second one, to create more employment opportunities. Yes, we believe in that. The third one, to utilize the available human resources better, which we are looking forward altogether. The next one is to accelerate the progress of the country through different norms, methodology and means, which is also very much the need of the hour. And the next one is the level of international standards and competitiveness. So let's go one by one. The first thing is productivity. The reason for any industrial policy to exist in a country is to increase production. So you might be producing one good or you might be producing 1,000 varieties of good. But at the end of the day, when you are going to look into your balance sheet, you are going to be asking this question: what has been the production capacity of the country? So somewhere down the line, we need to understand this factor. Unless and until we produce the necessity goods, the luxury goods, the all kinds of goods that are needed, we are not going to enhance our production capability. So definitely this is a very big objective which needs to be satisfied at any point of time. Followed by the employment opportunities that we are talking about. When you talk about a country like India with 135 billion population, the most important question that would raise before any government is the employment opportunity. Why? Because we have a huge amount of graduates who keep coming out like a factory. They have been churned out like byproducts of a factory and the system of education is so very well organized in India that we are able to get out with huge amount of graduates right from engineering, from commerce, from science, from every discipline as far as possible. But at the end of the day, the question that will be before the government is that will all these people get job? And the job of the kind what they are looking for. So now what happens here is that manufacturing sector is an answer to this question. Manufacturing sector is capable of taking in multiple jobs, providing multiple opportunities. So definitely one of the key objectives of industrial policy is to generate employment at all levels possible. So this has to be at the corner of mind. Next one is availability of the human resources, how to utilize it better. We all know that a populated country like India and China has got its own advantage and disadvantage. The disadvantage is already spoken about and told in volumes in almost every social media or probably every single platform that's available. The reason is that we always keep cribbing about the factor that yes, it is overcrowded. We are not able to satisfy the needs and wants of every people. But then when we start going back and understanding how can we make the best use of the given opportunity, the best use of this 130 billion plus population, then we would suddenly start realizing that yes, the opportunity comes from industrialization. The more the industrialization, more the advancement, then we would be able to use the human resource capability and we would be able to make a significant progress. Followed by accelerate the progress, which means the progress is there. Now, for example, if India is moving at 2% growth per annum, example. Now, what the manufacturing sector could do is probably accelerate it to 3 or even to 3.5%. So what is manufacturing sector doing to this particular ideology is that it is just accelerating the growth altogether and followed by the international standards and competitiveness that we are talking about today. International standard. Is India truly an international country? It's a very big question. Why? Because I would not give in for this factor saying that India, yes, is a truly international country. Yes, it can achieve these standards. No, I'm not trying to just break into the factor just like that. What I'm trying to say here is that India is definitely an international country. It has its capability. It has its capacity. Everything, point taken. But where we are trying to go back, where we are trying to again and again make ourselves clear about the stand, about the factor is that the competitive factor. Why? Because we have never competed against the international organizations. We have just been believed on the factor of self-satisfaction. We have just believed that if we produce less and that quantity is enough to satisfy the population of our country, that's more than enough. We have been doing a good job. But then when it comes to the international standards and competitiveness, you need to gear up. You need to prepare to that level. You need to have a quality that matches the standard. So that's where the manufacturing sector will have a challenge, will face a challenge, in fact, in terms of bringing in a solid industrial policy. Followed by the resolution, the industrial policy resolution, which took place in the year 1948. It was declared that India's economy as a mixed economy, a very, very crucial factor that we are speaking about. Why? Because we all know that India is a mixed economy because of the participation of both public sector as well as private sector coming into picture. The next thing is that the small scale and cottage industries were given importance, no doubt about it, because we wanted it in that way. We wanted the small scale and cottage industry to be given importance, and that's how we could probably grow up. We could probably develop a sector altogether. So this is where we wanted that entire sector to come up. So the small scale and the cottage industries were the topmost priority during the year 1948, and the government restricted foreign investments. We were not ready for the countries abroad, the outside countries, to come in and set up industries. Why? Because that was the just 1 year out in terms of independence. We were afraid that again a foreigner comes into our country, occupies the land, and again it starts an independence movement. We were not ready for that. What we were really ready is that we wanted to see that the small scale industries, the public sectors were given importance, and we pushed the economy from step 1 to step 2, but not taken the FDI into due course of action. Followed by the 1948 resolution started speaking about exclusive monopoly of central government in the areas of arms and ammunition, production of atomic energy, management of railways, and the industries were categorized into the 4 categories typically. Now let's go into this sector for a while. Arms, ammunition, talking about the defense, talking about the railways, and the energy and atomic space were an exclusive factor for the central government, and we still believe that they remain like that. Of course, today, what has been a slight change is that we have started introducing people, private players, to come into the defense sector as well as in the railways in the form of services that we have been speaking about. But nevertheless, we always kept these 4 sectors as the most precious sector. Literally, you cannot touch these sectors without the permission of the government. The reason was that the government always wanted to keep 100% control over the sector, and they did not want the management to get diluted in these factors. Followed by the new undertaking that was given in terms of the state government factor was on the coal, iron and steel, aircraft manufacturing, shipbuilding, telegraph, telephone. So now you can see that on the secondary level, we have been talking about the essential services factor, which was given a state government undertaking altogether. The reason being, it was very, very evident, it was very nominal to understand at that level that Government of India wanted to give a precision, wanted to give a complete factor in terms of all these essential services, and these industries were regulated by government with a basic importance, making the factor very clearly that government will hold the flag and we will not give it to the hands of private. Followed by open to private enterprises, individuals and cooperative. That was a remaining sector. That was last but not the least, I would like to say, during the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1948, where the private sector was completely ignored. We did not bother about it. At the same time, we were not restricting them. We didn't never say that please don't come. But we were giving them off the page completely, where they could do whatever they want. We were okay with that. We were not trying to force, or we were not trying to give them encouragement at any point of time. Followed by the 1956. Now we are trying to advance. So 11 years down the independence, about 10 years down the independence, we started thinking that, this is the actual basic framework that we are laying down, properly also known as the Economic Constitution of India. We all know that the Constitution of India was adopted on November 26, 1949, but the Economic Constitution of India came with the IPR, the Industrial Policy Resolution of 1956, which would cover the public sector, the private sector, and the mixed sector also, which comprises of both public and private sector. So we had 3 schedules altogether. Schedule A, which will talk only about the public sector. Schedule B, which will be covering about the public and private. We had 12 industries. And the Schedule C, which will talk only about the private industries altogether. Now, the provisions that we are talking about on public, private, small sectors or on the foreign investment was basically to meet the new challenges from time to time, and it got modified from 73, 77 and 1980. So you can see that this entire structure of policy has undergone a sea of changes in the last about 20-30 years altogether, trying to understand what could be the best policy that could redefine the entire structure and that could take the Indian economy to the next level. So what we are trying to do exactly here is that trying to categorize the industry, try to include the privatized sector also, and also create a space for the public sector. Now, moving further, what we did in the 1977 industrial policy is an extension of this. The main was the employment for the poor, and then we started reduction in concentration of wealth. This policy was majority focused on the decentralization part. It gave priority to the small scale industry, and we also created a new unit called as a tiny unit, which is later going to be known as the micro factor altogether. And this policy also imposed restrictions on the multinational company. Again, in the year 1977, though it's about 30 years of independence that we are talking about, but we were not liberalized enough. We have not opened the doors of our country where foreign countries or foreign companies could come inside and invest in India. So we still had restrictions, and we told very clearly that any point of time we are not giving that freedom for MNCs to set up in India. The 1980, again, an external factors that we are talking about, an externalization where we slowly started getting into selective liberalization and technology front. Of course, this was not a major upgradation. I would say that compared to 56, compared to 77, 80 was a great year. Why? Because that was the year at which we slowly started upgrading ourselves altogether, followed by the liberalized licensing provided for automatic expansion of the capacity. Now, this is very, very important. We were now trying to talk about the capacity enhancement, the production enhancement altogether. And due to this policy of the MRTP Act and the FERA Act, the foreign exchange factor that were introduced, this was the time period where we are literally talking about the growth, where we are literally talking about the movement of the sectors altogether. So this is definitely a most needed thing of the hour that we are talking about. Definitely this has a lot more importance that was created and how it has been taken forward in terms of the understanding. Followed by the 1980 policy was also to liberalize the industrial sector, to increase industrial productivity, competitiveness that we are talking about. This also laid the foundation for increasingly export based. Now, this was the year that we need to keep in mind. Why? Because export orientation was given importance. So the 1980 industrial policy is a turnaround in the economics of India. Why? Because that was the year, that was the resolution that we made, that from an import-based country, let's start moving into an export-based country. Followed by the 1991 new industrial policy, an absolute breakthrough for the Indian economy, where we really started talking about LPG, liberalization, privatization, and globalization, primarily to increase efficiency. Now, that was a very, very important thing. So why this was coming into picture? We brought in liberalization in order to reduce the government control. We allowed privatization because the scope of private sector was really fantastic. We allowed the globalization. We wanted to be a part of it. Why? Because Indian economy should become an integrated part of the global economy. So the 1991 era is the era of competition. It is the year when India declared itself not just an independent nation in economics, but also a competitive country in terms of economic growth. So this is where I would say LPG was a turnaround factor that started coming into the Indian economy. And you would see that in order to make competition even more interesting, we started allowing private sector, we started allowing new companies with FDI, foreign direct investment, to start coming in. And you would see that the investment ceiling was also raised from 40 to 51%, a huge jump that we are talking about in selected sectors, so that the efficiency will also improve, and we also started upgrading the technology. Probably that is the year I would like to mention again, when private banks like HDFC Bank, ICICI, IDBI Bank, and so many other private banks and technology companies started making their roots in the Indian economy. And today, all these companies are said to be the blue chip companies of India. So definitely this year is something that is very, very important for all of us to know in terms of the growth factor. Followed by the maximum FDI limit is 100% in selected sectors like that of infrastructure, Foreign Investment Promotion Board was also established. It was a single window FDI clearance agency. The technology transfer was also allowed under the automatic route. So we had made a lot of changes coming into this sector, and this year was giving us all bright hopes and perspectives, saying that India would usher itself into the new age of competition. So definitely, new industrial policy of 1991 is a must to know for all of us, which has redefined the Indian economy. Now, the other thing is that we also came up with a phased-wise manufacturing program. Under the mandatory convertibility clause, we were giving loans to firms who could just convert themselves into equity-based, private-based, limited factor. Industrial licensing was also abolished, except for 18 industries which were hold closed. But the remaining, we were trying to give an open market so that everybody can become a part of this economy. Followed by the monopolies and restrictive trade practice that was axed. The MITP Act was relaxed in the year 1991, and as per the Raghavan Committee of the Competition Act of 2000 was passed, its objectives were very clear, that to promote competition with a healthy environment in mind and not to create any more monopoly based industries. Now, the way forward, what are that we are looking forward, what is the things that are kept in store for us, is that it's a time for us to replace this 30-year-old policy and start redefining the industrial policy of 2022, which will be more concentrated on renewable energy, more concentrated on healthcare, more concentrated on financial technologies, on education, and trying to make India the infrastructure superpower with its manufacturing capability. Now, what is going to happen here is that government is definitely going to work on a new industrial policy that would map every of these factors and make India a much more stronger, capable nation and make it much more competitive than we all expected. With this, I come to the end of this particular session. I hope and believe that all the factors that I have spoken about the industrial policy would be of great help to you, both in terms of theory as well as in practical. In the upcoming segment, we will be talking about the industrial development, which is a very important phase in the reforms of Indian economy. But until then, stay tuned, stay blessed, and stay enlightened forever. Thank you once again for joining me today on this wonderful session.